Recently, I had the opportunity to visit Sweetwater's headquarters for Drum Month and check out a ton of new gear that a bunch of different drum companies are releasing. And there was one thing that stood out to me more than anything being there for Drum Month, and that was e-kits are everywhere. When I say e-kit, I mean electronic drum kits, and this kind of makes sense. People have to practice in apartments and in a way that doesn't disturb their people that live in their house with them and, at all hours of the day. And e-kits are a great solution for low volume practicing and playing in maybe a gig situation where you have to be super, super quiet and you bring a little speaker. But before you go buying your first e-kit, I think it's important to consider a few factors because not all e-kits are considered equal, in my opinion. And investing in one can be expensive, and if it's not kind of what you want because you haven't thought through a couple things, it can be pretty soul-crushing to play them. Now, if you don't know me, I'm Tim Buell. I'm a drummer living here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've toured with artists like Cody Fry and Gloriana and Janet Kramer and Jared Neiman and Remedy Drive, and I also have a studio and record drums for not just producers here in Nashville, but producers and artists all over the world. And e-kits, although I don't play them much anymore, they're a really important part of my story as a drummer because I've actually had a Roland TD20 for about 15 years now. As well, I have a ton of videos here on my YouTube channel and also a whole course on my website about the Roland SPD-SX and how to use it with gigs. So over the last decade or more, I've seen e-kits, I've seen electronic drums evolve and change. So let's talk about 5 things you should consider before you get an electronic drum kit. The first thing you should consider when getting an electronic drum kit is expensive does not always equal better. Now, I'm a huge believer that you get what you pay for and you should buy quality once instead of buying cheap and then having to buy the same thing over and over again. But back 15, 20 years ago, when e-kits were much more limited, there weren't as many things offered, you really did kind of have to buy at the top of the food chain to get a product that felt good, that felt usable. But now there's so many different electronic drum kits offered out there that I don't think the same thing is true now. So if you go to Sweetwater's website right now, which is a good time to go there because it's Drum Month and they're offering a bunch of deals and specials that are happening this month. So go over to Sweetwater. There will be links in the description of anything I talk about in this video. They have a bunch of cool deals going on. And if you head over there right now, you'll find that you can get an electronic drum kit right now from anywhere from $400 up to $10,000. That's a giant range of money to spend on an electronic drum kit. And in the middle of that pack there is the Alesis Strata Prime. That's a drum kit that I recently got to play and spend some time on when I was at Sweetwater, and that is a drum kit that falls soundly in the middle of this range, or even maybe below middle of the range, and it felt really good to play, and it sounded good. It's got a lot of cool features. So I don't think it's true that you have to buy at the top of the e-kit price range to get something you'll be happy with. Biggest suggestion is, if you can, go play these e-drum kits or go to Sweetwater's YouTube channel and check out all the different demos and stuff they have. Listen to people play them, check out videos of the features that they have, and find something that's right for you in your price range. Maybe toward the bottom of the price range, you're going to be more limited with what those offer, but at the top of the price range, you're not necessarily always getting, spending $1,000 more and $1,000 better experience. So that's something to be mindful of. And also keep in mind, all of these e-drum kits, just like real acoustic drum kits, electronic drum kits have a lot of customization that you can do, both with how you tune the heads on them and how those feel and respond, the sensitivity settings inside the brain, how you can change and morph and tune the drums inside the drum brain. So expensive isn't always better. There's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of different offerings out there, and you can probably find an electronic drum kit in your price range. So the second thing that you should consider and watch out for when you're buying an electronic drum kit are take a very close look at whatever that drum kit has for hi-hats. Electronic hi-hats are notorious for, I'll just be honest, they're just not good. It's really hard to get two cymbals to interact together where your foot is pressing them. This is a hard technology. And over the years, we've seen it evolve a lot. And I think there's just a couple things you should keep in mind with electronic drum set hi-hat situation. I think if you can, looking at electronic drum kits that actually have a physical real hi-hat stand with the electronic hi-hats is, to me, a must. The little kind of foot pedal things that have the wire that connects to like kind of a rubber pad or whatever, those just aren't super playable. They have missed triggers and all kinds of stuff. And I would just kind of avoid those if your price range just doesn't allow it. I get it, but getting something with a real hi-hat stand will not only, usually means the technology involved is a little bit better and it'll be a little more playable. I think it's also important to remember with electronic drum kits, so ideally we want whatever we're doing on the electronic drum kit to feel like it's going to feel on the acoustic drum kit. And having a real physical hi-hat stand with two cymbals that kind of get compressed together, that's gonna ultimately feel a lot more like an acoustic drum kit than, just a little pedal that connects to a rubber pad and things like that. And you wanna keep in mind, whatever you do on this electronic drum kit, if you're spending hours and hours and hours practicing on it, how is that going to translate to the acoustic drum kit? So I think getting a real physical hi-hat stand, really important. Last thing with electronic hi-hats and what to look out for is they have a lot of adjustability. Most electronic drum kits that have hi-hats have a bunch of sensitivity settings in the brain that you can adjust. The hi-hats that actually you play usually have, not just your normal adjustment with how far apart each cymbal is, but there's a bunch of little settings in there to tweak them. So it's really important to remember, if you sit down an electronic drum kit and you're not instantly happy with how the hi-hat feels, there's usually a good amount of adjustability, but that's something to look out for. When you're doing your research and looking at electronic drum kits, make sure you check out the hi-hats, see how adjustable they are, and see if they have a real hi-hat stand. Now, the third thing you should look at when looking into getting an electronic drum kit are the heads on the drums. For me, I think tunable mesh heads on as many drums as you can get is better. At the very minimum, I would say getting a mesh head that is tunable on the snare drum is kind of a must. Rubber pads on the toms are you can work with that, but I think the snare drum, you're playing it so much more. It's such a vital part to your sound as a drummer and translating to an acoustic drum kit that I think it's really important to have at least a mesh tunable head on the snare drum. But ideally, all the drums get the mesh tunable heads, and this is for a couple reasons. Usually, that means that whatever brain is coming with it is a little more intelligent, will have a little more sensitivity settings and things like that you can dial in. An acoustic drum kit, when we play it and we play the snare drum and then we go down the toms, each tom that we play from high to low gets, bigger in size, and the heads usually have less and less tension in them. So when I play on the rack tom, that head is going to feel tighter than when I play on the floor tom. It's important, again, for our skills, whatever we're practicing on an electronic drum kit to translate to an acoustic drum kit, we want it to feel as similar as possible. So getting mesh heads where you can tune them so that they actually feel like what an acoustic drum kit feels like is going to help whatever we practice on our electronic drum kit translate better. Now, the fourth thing to consider when you're getting into electronic drum kits is, how are you going to hear it? This is something that a lot of people just totally forget about, but an electronic drum kit usually doesn't have speakers built into it. So you're going to need to find some way for you to hear what you're playing. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. There's headphones and there's speakers. So let's talk about both. For headphones, if you're going to go over the ear headphones, I really recommend getting headphones that plug into a headphone jack and also have a little bit of noise canceling. I found when people use just regular over-the-ear headphones that have no noise canceling properties, a lot of times they find that they can hear themselves kind of smacking the rubber pads over the volume coming from the drum kit. So then they end up having to crank the electronic drum kit really loud, which is super dangerous for your hearing, and you don't want to get into that. So I suggest picking up a pair of noise canceling headphones that you can plug in that have headphones built in, but also have noise canceling properties. I know Vic Firth makes a pair. There's several options on Sweetwater that are noise canceling headphones. And those are going to be a good place to start because they'll knock down that rubber pad ambient noise and you won't have to crank that electronic drum kit up super loud. So that's the way I'd go for headphones. Now for speakers, I recommend going with a JBL Eon, or Alesis makes several different kind of electronic drum kit speakers. Something to keep in mind is a lot of companies are selling like electronic drum kit speaker amplifier things, and you don't really need that. Any speaker will work. The really important thing to think about is, how you're going to need to be projecting the sound. Like if you need a lot of sound, if you're going to actually take your electronic drum kit to a gig, play it on stage, you'll want a bigger speaker, a high-powered speaker, versus just maybe you just want a little speaker for your practice room so you can hear stuff without having to wear headphones. You might want to just think about what is ultimately going to be the use of this speaker you're getting. And the second thing you want to think about is how wide the frequency range is that the speaker outputs. Drums are a low to high frequency range instrument. They cover, just about every frequency. So you're going to want a speaker that can reproduce all that. You wouldn't want to necessarily use a guitar amp for your electronic drum kit because that's not going to have the same full range as, something like a JBL Eon. So you don't necessarily have to buy a speaker that's specifically for electronic drum sets. You just want to make sure you buy a speaker that has full range, that's powerful enough to put out the amount of volume you need for whatever your end use is. And the last thing I'll say about how you hear and monitor your e-kit is I would avoid Bluetooth connectivity in any way. I know that there's technology out there that's kind of like evolving, and this is becoming less and less true, but in general, Bluetooth has a lot of latency, and that's just going to be a really weird playing experience. It's not one that you want. So for now, I would stay away from Bluetooth speakers or headphones to monitor your electronic drum kit. And lastly, the fifth thing to think about when you're getting an electronic drum kit, you're looking into it, is the brain is the biggest difference maker. All of these electronic drum kits are going to have pads and tunability and all that stuff. And we like to kind of focus on all of that because that's what we're hitting and that's what we actually feel if we just sit down at the drums and start hitting them. In reality, the brain that comes with your drum set is the most important aspect of it because that's going to define just almost your whole entire experience. Because in that brain, not only is it just the sounds that they've chosen, different companies are going to sample different drums and program different stuff in that brain so that, there are different sound options. And that's one thing to think about is the sounds that come with it. But the other things to think about when looking at a drum brain are, can you adjust the sensitivity and how much can you adjust the sensitivity for each of the drums, for each of the cymbals? How flexible are the sound options? Is it just you get to pick from all these sounds? Can you actually tune some of the sounds in there? Can you change the depth of the drums or the type of drum heads? Or, can you change what microphone is on the snare drum? Things like that. As well, what effects does it come with? Does it come with different reverbs, compression, things like that? And then you'll also really want to think about how do you listen to the e-drum kit and music at the same time? Because let's face it, we're hopefully all playing drums to play music. And when we're doing that, we'll need to hear the music and the e-kit at the same time. And how do we do that? What options does the brain offer for me to play along the songs and things like that? So the sensitivity of the pads, the sounds and how flexible and how much you can change them, the effects inside of there, and how you can hear music and play the drums at the same time. All of that goes into considering, which drum brain is right for you. So you could have the most expensive drum pads in the whole world that are mesh and beautiful, and you can tune them and they feel so good to play. But if they're connected to a drum brain that lacks the features and the sensitivity controls to really utilize all of the technology in those pads, your experience isn't really going to be any different. So the drum brain, it can sometimes be a little monotonous or boring to check out a video about all the features in the drum brain, but that really is what's going to kind of reveal to you how much flexibility and how much control you'll have over sculpting the experience you want on an electronic drum kit. Because at the end of the day, if you buy a kit that has a rich feature set, has good working parts, and the brain is well thought out, you'll be able to adjust that e-kit to be playable and sound like you want it to. And is it an acoustic drum kit at the end of the day? No, but there are amazing offerings out there. So head over to Sweetwater, check out these electronic drum kits. It's no better time than right now because it's drum month. Thank you so much, Sweetwater, for sponsoring this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.